Hello and welcome to Suzi's Book Bag, hosted by me, Suzi Fay. Sceptre book bag, Sceptre author, someone who I spotted early on with their very first book, a collection of short stories called Parallel Hells. It was Leon Craig. I loved the short stories, reviewed them for the FT, and I said I categorised them as Angela Carter with an LGBTQ plus filter, and also a nod to M.R. Jones, some of my very favourite writers. So you can see how I was very keen to see how Leon Craig, for it is she, was going to develop. I'm really delighted to say that she has a new book out, her debut novel. It is called The Decadence, and it's been creeping me out madly ever since I picked it up. So without more ado, I'm going to welcome Leon into the book bag. Hello.
Hello, Suzi, and thank you for having me on the show. You really are my dream reader.
Hooray! Well, I did go to your launch, and I'm sure there were a lot of dream readers there as well. That was at the lovely Owl Bookshop in Kentish Town. So, The Decadence. There's an early nod to Boccaccio quite early on in this novel, which kind of sort of signals a few things to us right at the beginning, that this might be something to do with the plague. This might be something to do with people cooped up together. Tell us about the initial inspiration for The Decadence, your first novel.
Yes, gladly. So I was 18, I was loafing about, interrailing, and decided, pretentious 18-year-old though I was, that I was going to start reading the Decameron in a square in Florence, and began reading, was like really mesmerized by their description of people meeting in a church during the plague, while they're, all around them bodies are being kind of rolled into plague pits, and they decide that they're going to get out of the city and go to a house in the hills and wait until it blows over and start telling each other stories. And I was looking around me and seeing there were loads of other people who kind of around my age then. I was like, hang on, we're the same age as the characters, but we're not genteelly playing the lute and reminding each other about kind of our Christian virtue. I mean, at least I don't think they were. They definitely weren't playing the lute. And I was like, hang on a minute. This still has like an enduring relevance to my life and how I behave with my friends, and the sort of compare and contrast element. And then when COVID did actually happen, it just became, I felt like my connection to that text was kind of reawakened.
So it's a COVID story. When did you write it? Was it because your first book, which was Parallel Hells, as I've said, that was 2022, wasn't it? Did you? How did it work? Did you immediately start writing this? Were you writing this before? Have you been writing it for a very long time? Tell us how it came together.
So, I mean, this story in some form or another has been kind of hanging off my shoulders like a kind of book or revenant or something, like ever since I was in my late teens. And I've tried to write it so many times. I started writing Parallel Hells to get away from it. Right. And then it came back yet again. And I think this time I was actually more or less ready for it. So I sat down in, to say, the summer of 2021, so a little bit after the pandemic. I was like, okay, we're going to do this now. We have to do this now, and began writing again. But it's been through so many evolutions, so it's almost very weird to exist apart from the book, because it's been my kind of constant companion.
And indeed, the very strange characters who are holed up in Holt Hall, this extraordinary mansion that you've conjured. So really interesting characters, not especially nice characters. And are they all sort of kind of late 20s? I think Leo is nudging into his 30s, or he's just into his, not Leo, sorry, Theo. Theo is a pretty pivotal character, but is that the sort of age, they're late 20s? nudging
That's
their
correct.
30s.
So everyone's in their mid to late 20s. A lot of them were at university or at school together, and they're in that kind of post-quarter life crisis drift where some of them, like Ursi, like have a plan, they're very determined, they're beginning to figure out how things work, and some of the others are still kind of flailing and struggling, whereas Theo's in his early 30s, and because he has all this ancestral wealth, has inherited this house, you know, he's kind of adrift but in a different way to the others.
Exactly. I really captured for me that idea of, like you say, you know, the first quarter of your life, like you've been through school, you have school friends, you might have been through college, in which case you have college friends, and then you know, you're starting to go to work. But are you going to take all these people with you? Are they friends for life? Or, I mean, I think this group of people, they're sort of looking at each other, some of them, and kind of going, maybe it's time I said goodbye to you. I mean, it makes for a very kind of tense atmosphere in the house, doesn't it?
It's super tense because I mean, I do think that underlying a lot of their arguments with each other, and particularly their political arguments, they do really love each other. Like, that is why they keep hanging out with each other, but they also piss each other off so much. And it was kind of great fun in a kind of sadistic way to lock them in this remote location where ordinarily they probably would have stormed out at about midway through day one. And now that they can't get away from each other, they also can't get away from their problems with each other.
Did you have a kind of plan of the house? It's got an eastern wing and a western wing. It's fairly crucial who gets what bedroom at one point. You know, there's a layout, and I guess everybody who reads it is going to invent their own spooky mansion. But in terms of moving the characters around, did you have to pretty much have a floor plan?
Oh, yes, I drew out a floor plan. I have managed to lose half of it in my apartment in Berlin, but I am when I locate the other half, I'm going to post it on Instagram because I think maybe it will help readers. But yes, there was a lot of worrying about where pipes go, so that to have, and also more crucially for the actual character relationships, who was going to be sleeping in which bedroom, because, you know, not all of the sexual liaisons are entirely licit, so it's quite important to know who's sleeping where.
And there's, in addition, an awful lot of drinking and heroic amounts of drug taking. So I finished it late last night, which is the perfect time to finish a book like this. Hell of a twist. We're not going to give anything away. Hell of a finale. But I actually dreamt last night that I was smoking heroin and having like weird experiences within the dream as a result. I am the person least likely to. So I think, I mean, do you ever do that, Leon? Do you ever do that? Like, you're half asleep, you're kind of finishing a book, and then you go into dream world and you're sort of weirdly still in the book, because that's kind of what it felt like.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think part of the underpinning for this book is that I used to have all these really strange nightmares, that there was like an extra layer to my grandmother's house that was just filled with like nodding, clicking skeletons. And if I went upstairs wrong in my dreams, I'd end up in the ghost layer. And, you know, over time, that's kind of got blended together with lots of other haunted house novels. So, for instance, books like House of Leaves or The Haunted Woman, all of which kind of feature spatial disturbances. And I used to actually walk through the floor plan of Holt House in my mind while I was writing this like last iteration of the book. And I had to make myself stop doing that after it went to proofread, because I was like, this has become weird and unhealthy, but I kind of miss it.
Yeah. I think that's why it does feel so real. And yeah, it's a haunted house story. I don't want to say too much about what goes on, because in a way, one of the most fascinating things is the way these characters all bounce off each other and what they, in a way, collectively conjure in terms of their own fears, and also, very clever, this why they're there. It's almost like, you know, the purpose of the individual characters. I think of all of them, I think Jan and Ursi are kind of the nicest, or maybe the most. Well, they're not really relatable because the characters are they're so odd and different, aren't they? I mean, did you think about who's going to be the way into this story? Do we basically have to see through somebody's eyes more than everybody else's?
Yes. So, I mean, a lot of the characters, including Jan and Ursi, are at times very kind of spiky. You wouldn't necessarily want to be stuck in a lift with them. God knows I was stuck with them for years. And I think one of the things that I try to do in fiction is, even when the characters are right, they're also a little bit wrong, and that it was a deliberate choice to have the book in close third, because I'm not Jan, but biographically I probably have the most in common with her. But I also wanted to show the authorial gaze where she gets stuff wrong, or where she just behaves badly, and even if she's not fully cognizant of it, you can see the other characters' reactions. Like, sometimes she's actually really mean to Ursi, or to the other characters. Sometimes she's wrong about stuff.
She is she's in a curious position vis-a-vis Theo, and his girlfriend Nadia knows them both really well, but she's sort of put herself in this very subservient role, and it's clear that she's taken that on, or are they kind of exploiting her a little bit? But it sort of works both ways, doesn't it?
I think it does work both ways, because on one level it's sort of doing something for her psychologically, like she's sort of working something out, like, this is how far I can kind of push myself into subservience before I'm going to snap. This is how bad I need people to like me. Oh no, wait, this is the cost of them liking me, I don't want to pay it. But at another level, yes, it is really convenient for Theo that Jan is taking on the management of the catering for the holiday. She's kind of being the den mother. It's convenient for Nadia to have someone that she could sleep with, who she doesn't have to acknowledge as a full person. But one of the things that I was trying to do with the book in a thematic level is talking about kind of who has which information and how consensual a lot of those interactions are. For instance, I don't think Jan would necessarily have agreed to do what she does for the house party had she known some of the things that Theo has already sort of said and done. And there are other characters like Cara and Luke who've had quite crucial information withheld from them, or they've been lied to, and that influences their behaviour with each other really strongly.
Yes, Luke is an interesting character because he's initially not all that sympathetic, and I think he becomes more sympathetic, as the tensions rise and everything gets more enmeshed and frantic. And it's nice to have character arcs, isn't it? Do you? I mean, talk about the twist actually, or the ending. I'll just say the ending. Do you work backwards from that, or are you writing and thinking, I don't know where this is going? Like, what are these characters doing? How does it work in the writing?
So I knew that there would be a lethal and dramatic ending, and the manner of the ending was in some ways predetermined. I think it's okay to talk about fire. I don't think that's
okay. Yeah.
It's kind of actually signaled in the first page. It's subtle, but it is there, and that's not giving away the major twist. Because my background was doing medieval literature for a lot of years. There's this bit in Volsunga Saga where one of the women has accomplished something for vengeance that she really wanted to do, but she had to do something really terrible to get there. And she has the opportunity to leave the burning hall that has her husband in, and she actually sort of turns back and goes back inside. She's like, I don't want to be alive anymore. And that really stuck with me and made me think about who of my characters feels like that sometimes about themselves, like how much shame are they carrying, and what would you do in that scenario? And so trying to work backwards for how do I get them into this horrifying conflagration from the slightly more low level problems that they have with each other at the beginning was the work of writing it.
I mean, one of the problems they have is that they are in effect trapped because it is lockdown, and this adds to the paranoia. We can't leave, we can't go. They try and escape or make fitful attempts to escape and really can't get very far. And one of the things, in a kind of Withnell and I sort of way, is like, we're going to run out of wine because their intake is so extraordinarily prodigious. I mean, the Viking thing, that is something that isn't Jan. She's attempting to do a PhD, and isn't it in this kind of area, the sagas and the Vikings?
It is in this kind of area, and that was sort of why I felt a bit more confident writing her into that mindset, because the mindset that I'd left, I did not do a PhD, and I think for me personally that was the right decision. And she's still wrestling with it, 3 or 4 years on. Like, how do I finish this? How do I kind of move into the present day and become a kind of fully integrated human being? But yeah, some of those habits of mind, like the kind of drinking and carousing, are still very present in the text.
They're really obsessed in a way with privilege. Who has it? Who doesn't have it? And there's a kind of bit of a privilege Olympics going on, isn't there? Like, the sort of, well, it's all right for you, you've got money. Well, it's all right for you. And Eerie in many ways is she's sort of the most successful and fulfilled in one way. And is she black or mixed race?
She's black. She's black
in a way, yeah. So she's sort of always got the trump card in a way, in the sort of, well, I'm more privileged than you, but he's more privileged than all of us. And Eerie can always sort of, there is a line. I mean, Jan is Jewish, but doesn't necessarily look Jewish, or she isn't immediately identified as Jewish. It's there if you can see it, but if you can't see it, it's not there. And there's a line in it that Eerie has to be, it's visibly, she is what she is. And I thought that was, again, a really interesting strand, that they've almost been schooled to look for privilege and delineate in minute terms. And it affects the way they deal with each other. Very interesting, I thought.
Yes. So a lot of the time, I mean, the characters are kind of flinging mud at each other, like, you get to say this for this reason, you get to say this for this reason. And also you still seeing, sometimes because they're pointing it out, or sometimes just because it's apparent in the story, they're like relative kind of hypocrisy about, well, you've made all of these accusations, but actually, you have this ability. And the really sad thing is actually that, like, they could have a lot of solidarity with each other. And I think towards the end of the book, Jan and Eerie do work this out, that we're both racial minorities in a house that absolutely hates us, and it hates us both for more or less the same reason. But it takes them a while to get there because they're so kind of busy with the mudslinging, not helped by Cara.
And another aspect that intrigued me is and there's no kind of, you haven't put a trigger warning or anything, which often appears in books, but there's some reference to the girls having cut themselves and having scars, particularly Nadia, who has a very interesting backstory, but she wears long sleeves. And I wouldn't say it's normalized, but there's just something about, oh yeah, we all do that. And this is where, would you call this a generational tale? I mean, maybe every writer in a way is writing from their own generation, but that seemed so sort of strange and unusual and sad to me to read, that these girls are scarred, arms and legs.
I mean, it very much is a millennial novel. I hope there are readers who are not millennials who will also enjoy it, and with,
like me.
Exactly. Like, elements of it hopefully also resonate with you, or are interesting, even if they're outside of your own experience. Yeah, I mean, sadly, this was really super common. And I think, part of it is kind of generational ills. I think part of it was also being under quite a lot of academic pressure, which both Nadia and Jan were, and being in a kind of a particular environment where the only thing you can do with that kind of stress and in some ways anger is turn it inwards, or latterly in Nadia's case, kind of psychologically torment other people with that anger instead of trying to change your own life.
Okay, well let's chat about the kind of outnumbered boys. So we've mentioned Theo and we've mentioned Luke, but just give a little character sketch of each of those.
So Luke is one of their university friends. He has really wanted to be an actor, but his life has gone really far off course. He's sort of gone away to Southeast Asia for many years, and everyone thought he was going to break off his relationship with Cara, but then when he comes back, it kind of resumes again, and they're just locked in this really unhealthy, almost like Sid and Nancy type relationship. But he also has a lot of sweetness. So a lot of the time, he's actually trying not to run into the drama and trying to see the good in other people. And I would hope that that's what makes him an engaging character, in that although the others hold him a lot of suspicion because like he has stolen stuff, he also is really trying to show up and is trying to be self-reflective, but it's just the worst possible scenario.
True. And also he does suffer from people projecting ideas onto him. So there's a lot of negativity towards him. And it's one of the things that you're looking at in the novel. I mean, on one level, we can say it's a supernatural novel about a haunted house, but there's so much interesting stuff in the interplay of the characters. So, you know, he's quite burdened down with this, and he seems to be trying to free himself of his own past behaviour and the fact that it's entailed so much negativity. And I think he works through a lot. They don't want him there. I mean, right at the beginning, they're like, God, not him. Who invited him? Did he have to be here? And there's something very poignant about that, because and Jan feels this as well. Ursi feels this as well. I'm in this place and I don't fit. I don't belong, and people don't want me to be here. And it's tremendously sad. And it's, you know, there are three different facets of that, aren't there? So Theo. Well,
the house and how unwelcome they all feel into it is very much connected to the way that all the characters are burdened by their past. So their kind of literal past with each other, and also kind of their historical British past and their kind of social roles within that. And in some ways, Theo is actually no different, because, you know, he didn't ask to have this house handed to him by great uncle Harold. It just was. He has had some extremely creepy experiences of his own, which he's trying very hard not to think about. You know, he has these sort of aging parents who he's clearly the apple of their eye, but they've also just let him get away with everything. So he's sort of flunked out of various degrees, and then he's sort of drifted into this relationship with Nadia, and then he doesn't like that she's making demands of him. And we meet them at this really crucial point in their relationship where Nadia's immigration status is very precarious and he has to step up to the plate, but he does it in a way that's like very unsatisfactory.
You just mentioned a little earlier the Viking stuff, the sagas and the literature, Norse literature, which is a tremendously rich field. And I remember quite a few years ago now, probably pre-COVID, I think you came to the Polari Salon, and did a hilarious talk about mad things that happen in Norse literature, you know, just completely crazy storylines. And I remember we were all roaring with laughter. I mean, do you think you might do something with some of that? And, you know, filtered in a subtle way, but tell us a little bit about your love of the literature, and do you still read Norse literature?
I absolutely do still love it. I mean, my reading tastes have kind of broadened as I've left academia, but I think it is. I think it does show up in the novel also in unexpected ways, not just in terms of Jan's sort of limping along with her PhD thesis. For instance, I mean, Theo is kind of the archetype of a weak monarch, whether he has all these people kind of assailing his kingdom, but he still has this underlying power, and how kind of that people then underestimate that at their peril. I mean, there's also this wonderful long poem called The Waking of Anne Gantier, which is about a kind of female warrior. I think she's like I think she's trying to consult the dead to kind of find this sword. And it's been a long time since I read it, but that also made this huge impression on me. And Jan has this like quite interesting relationship with her own gender, where in some ways she's sort of trying to fulfill these kind of demands of femininity made on her, and in other ways she knows that they're unfulfillable, and she's almost a kind of challenger figure to Theo.
I wanted to ask you about your kind of process and how you write, because I mean that seems quite interesting. This is obviously a project that you wrote for a bit, put down, left, came back to, left again, wrote a bit more maybe. It feels very tightly structured now. So how did you create the whole thing? Did you come up with the characters first, the house first? How did it work? I mean, you have the Boccaccio story. So I guess the people in the house and the isolation was the starting point.
The house came in fairly early. At one point, I had 10 characters and 10 days, more in line with Boccaccio, and it just was not working. There were too many. And then in the winter of, I think, 2022, I got really ill, and I was... because in Germany they sell you cough medicine that doesn't work. I have a kind of stash of British cough medicine, and I started drinking the really weird green stuff that has a bunch of warnings on it. And like in the middle of being really ill, I was like, oh, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to like get rid of at least 4 characters, and then I'm going to like collapse the timelines. And it was like a stroke of like mad cough medicine induced inspiration. But like, I got better, I did it, and then it got easier to restructure.
I'm fascinated that German cough medicine doesn't work. That's quite just not strong enough. I mean,
it's not very potent, I'm afraid. They really like herbs and things, and like that's probably good. But once you've had the strong stuff, it's hard to get used to.
Right. Yeah. And did you get any help from your dear mum, in-house inspiration from the great Amanda Craig? Or, well, I suppose were you in Berlin by this point? So could you sort of send her an email and go, I'm a bit stuck? Or did you want to leave her out of it? I
mean, we talk very regularly. Sometimes we fight like cats and dogs. Sometimes we have lovely time talking about kind of art and books and like world affairs. But yeah, we're always talking. But because she is the person who taught me to read, usually I do not allow her to edit my work because it has too much psychological weight, I think. And, we've worked out between ourselves that just doesn't necessarily work for us. I think 2/3 of the way through the writing of this last version of the Decadence, I had a bit of a wobble and then did allow her to read it. And most of her commentary was actually just about the plants and flowers. Like there are a couple of stray details that I think, I just have to own up. Like I'm not a gardener. She's a wonderful gardener. I'm not. I still make mistakes. But I was very worried that she was just going to be like, this is filled with lesbian sex. I can't read this. This is too much for me. But actually she was like, look, the soil in this part of the world is not that color. Like you need to fix this.
That's actually brilliant. That's what you want. I mean, if somebody was to say, I don't know, maybe Leo should be 7 foot tall and come from Poland, or like there's stuff that's not helpful, or I wrote something once and sent it to an agent, and they said, oh, the character's name isn't right, and it's like, what are you talking about? That's the name I gave them. How can the character's name not be right? So I actually think that's really brilliant. That's what you need, isn't it? Little details that if they make it into the final book, somebody's just going to write in and correct you. So what was she like with the short stories? Did you send the short stories as and when you wrote them?
No, like the first time she read them was post-publication, because I mean, both of us are very opinionated. So it's just like to be able to psychologically able to do this, she just needs to not read it until it's in a form where it is unalterable. Like, she was very supportive during the writing process. She knew that I was writing, but I just had a firewall where I was like, you go away and do your own writing, which I admire. I'm going to do mine, and it has to be like that.
I love Amanda to bits. She's a really good friend. Opinionated is kind of the adjective that I would use. But of course, you know, she's a critic. She's a literary critic herself. So she has that, you know, that kind of laser focus in a way, as well as the creative side. I can imagine you probably would have to have, you know, kind of not barriers, but you know what I mean, kind of, you'd have to sort of mark out your own territory, which is actually very different to Amanda's. You're writing different sorts of fiction, aren't you? Let's talk a little bit about the inspirations. You've got a great list in the back of the book, the author's notes, where it's not just I read these books and I loved them and I wanted to do something similar. You're really thinking about a genre, aren't you, and seeing what you can add to a genre.
I mean, I'm really lucky that I got to put that in the back, because I mean, you know, like readers like you pull out lots of different influences. There are probably also influences in there that I'm subtly not aware of, which is always a fun thing to have pointed out to you. But yeah, writing the author's note in the back meant that I kind of got to do a review of all of the reading that I'd done while trying to finish this. And because it in some ways is a very hybrid book, I read a lot more traditional country house novels like The Shooting Party and The Go-Between, but I also read a lot of Gothic fiction and haunted house novels, and sort of spliced them together because it felt like those two genres were already kind of in conversation, and I wanted them in my book to be like, you know, screaming at each other up and down the staircase. So then trying to think about how to explain that interchange was useful, and kind of felt like I was completing a circle.
I haven't actually read The Shooting Party, but it's been recommended to me several times, and I know it was made into a film. I think Isabel Colgate died fairly recently, didn't she? What did that feed in? I mean, you also mentioned things like Brideshead Revisited, probably more widely known, but the Shooting Party set you on a certain path, didn't it?
Yes, I wasn't expecting to get as much out of it as I did. I really love that novel. I think that she has this very light touch characterization that really kind of breathes life into what would what would be otherwise be quite a very mannered novel, but you start to really understand the characters and their sort of affairs with each other and their concerns. I think they're also kind of quite worried about who's going to be sleeping in which room now that occurs to me. But the main thing that I got from it was, I don't think what the author intended for me to get, which is that one of the guests of The Shooting Party is this slightly stereotypical Jewish character called Reuben Hergesheimer, who has been knighted and is having an affair with one of the other characters, Aline, and is considering, you know, what would it have been like if I'd had a son? And he starts to realize that he has this very strained relationship with assimilation, and it would been concretized for him had he had a son. You know, would I send my son to Eton? Would I make him eat pork, or would I actually kind of bring him up as an observant Jew? And then when I was reading that, something clicked, and I was like, oh, this is also a story about being a racial other in a place that is incredibly traditional.
And when I did my review of Parallel Hells, name-checking Angela Carter and M.R. James, was I in the right ballpark with those particular writers?
I was absolutely thrilled by that. And yes, you were. Like, I think Angela Carter is fantastic. I read her like actually, I think I read them both at a very formative age. But how like lush Angela Carter's sentences are. They're very dense, and you can go back to them again and again and see something different every time. It's kind of, it's the visual equivalent would be that Howl's room in a Howl's Moving Castle, where every corner has something different. And then M.R. James, I'm just obsessed with. And again, one of my other favorite podcasts is the Ghost Story Book Club, and you get to close read M.R. James with the host, which is so much fun because there's always something in there. He's done like a nasty little trick that you only realise like on the third go round.
What's your favourite M.R. Jones story? Is there one that particularly resonates or is particularly terrifying? There's just something about the verbal effects that, and actually there is a moment with Jan in a darkened room where you have quite a similar kind of creepiness. I think you have to hear something, glimpse something. It has to be something sensory, and I think you nailed it. So what would be your favourite M.R. Jones story?
I think at the moment it's the mezzo tint, and yes, the effects I think were really formative to read because he often doesn't show you the whole thing. He kind of, he will drip feed the image to you, and then we'll have like one really short description that makes you just absolutely cringe. Mm-hmm. And yes, there's a point where Jan kind of goes into the deep heart of the house and has this encounter with its very long and extremely unsavory history that probably is drawing on M.R. James because you aren't seeing everything, but you're seeing just enough to know how bad it is.
Yeah, exactly. I think I would say probably Lost Hearts, which again has a hideous house or a stately home in a park, and it is imbued with the evil spirit of its owner, who is actually still alive, in the story. But again, there are just a few descriptions in that where you wince and think, oh, this is terrible. I mean, he creates the atmosphere of malignancy. It's not just, oh, there's something creepy happening or, oh, there's a ghost. The atmosphere of malignancy. And it's a huge part of your book as well, isn't it? So then we get into kind of cultural critique, I suppose. The house and its history. It's a kind of evil history of empire in many ways, isn't it?
Yes, because the house is almost 1,000 years old. I mean, they started out as basically a long hall, and then it's been added onto by each owner from the Mortimer family, and it has these really strong connections with, for instance, the Crusades, which you could choose to view as the beginning of empire and the beginning of kind of British meddling in the Middle East. And then a lot of the kind of latter Mortimers have also been involved with things like tea and sugar, and therefore by extension the slave trade. And it's because it's the second sons, it's often the more warlike ones, the ones who take the worst risks and often do the most cruel things. And then when you get into the 20th century, the house, I mean, I'm not going to give away the twist, but the house also has a bearing on that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what was the publishing process like? I mean, you published your short stories, so in a sense, was it fairly easy to say? So was it Canongate the first? Who published the first book?
They're both with Sceptre.
They're both with Sceptre, right? Yeah. Oh, I was talking to somebody else who was published by Canongate. So it's quite unusual to publish short stories first, isn't it? Because people say, oh, they don't really sell. Was it sort of, we'll publish your short stories, but can you get on with a novel? Or were you saying, I've got a novel, but I actually have these short stories ready to go? How did it work?
I mean, often a more typical format for debuts is that you have the short story collection and then you have the novel afterwards. It's in some ways, at least this is because I used to work in publishing as well, my perception is that in some ways it's harder to do mid-career short stories unless you have like a spectacular best-selling novel. Though there are also writers who buck this trend who are very talented. I really love the short story form. And because I was writing the collection, partly teaching myself how to write and partly just exploring a range of related topics that were interesting to me, kind of like loneliness and queerness and the body and sadomasochism and depression, and haunting, of course. I knew that in order to get to a place where I could finally write this book and be done with it, I needed to do that. But I also wanted to give it the time and attention that I've that I felt that it deserved. And I think the two projects do speak to each other in a lot of ways. But yeah, it's not totally atypical for there to be a kind of 1-2 punch of short story collection and then debut novel.
So now, as a writer with two books under your belt, do you have a daily writing practice? Are you working on another novel? Are you working on more short stories? What's happening in your writing life?
Many things. So I have a draft of a new novel, which is dark, but in a slight, it's not unrelated, but it's slightly different, because this one is set in Berlin. It has a speculative element. It's still got a lot of lesbians, and a lot of weird sex, and a lot of people arguing.
Is that going to be that, weird sex, lesbians, and arguing? Is that your wheelhouse, as it were?
I think what I'm really interested in actually is power and betrayal, and also history. And those just show up in lots of actually quite unexpected ways. I mean, the new book is kind of in conversation with the, at times, extremely tragic and uncomfortable history of Berlin, in the same way that the Decadence is in conversation with the kind of like the history of the aristocracy in Britain, even if it doesn't immediately take that on like head on, it is always in there. And, how else to express power and betrayal but just weird sex and arguing? Yeah,
it's got it all. So you live in Berlin, don't you? Why? What's it like that? I'm getting, I still sort of think Weimar Republic, David Bowie making Low. What's the vibe like these days, and what's it like to be a creative person there?
So I moved there for a relationship during the end of the lockdown, which felt like a completely bizarre decision. It actually did make things in some ways a bit easier, because I didn't have FOMO while I was dealing with all of the German bureaucracy. And then I was frequently kind of commuting back to London because I was working remotely as an editor. And I'm still in Berlin now, in a kind of different phase of my life. And what is it like to be a creative person? I mean, I think Berlin is in a state of flux, because until a few, let's say 5-7 years ago, it was a very cheap place. It was very attractive to creatives. The rents were still more controlled than they are now. And now they have a massive housing deficit, which is always a disaster for artists, because artists don't get paid very much typically. And they're also now beginning to push through cuts to cultural funding, which I find really sad. And I think if it continues, it's going to really strip the city of a lot of cultural vibrancy.
I mean, describe your cultural life in the city. I mean, I have never been. I would love to go. I'd just love to go to the galleries. Don't they have absolutely sensational museums and art galleries?
Yes, the museums and art galleries are fantastic. I mean, you have the older, more established collections like the Gemälde, and then you have things like the Königk Gallery, which is more contemporary. They also have Sammlung Boros, which is in a former Nazi bunker that was then taken over during the GDR by the communists. It's got all these really bizarre like flues in it to prevent against kind of nuclear poisoning, which it wouldn't have worked actually. But it's incredibly heavy reinforced concrete, and it's also designed a bit like a maze, because at one point they were using it to store grain in. So you have to go around it with a tour, and that has like a revolving collection of different contemporary artists. I think the last time I was there, two of the things that really stuck with me were this Chinese artist who boiled down Coca-Cola to make bricks, and it still smelled like Coca-Cola, but it was these sort of lumps of sugar, and it was really disgusting but really interesting. And also a prosthetic limb that was sort of activated by motion. It would get up and it would start dancing around. And because I'm fascinated by ghosts, I was really interested in that. I think that artist was South American and was sort of interested in disability justice. But they changed the collection every couple of years, and there is a lot of new thinking and new things happening as well as old things. And I find that really, satisfying is not it. It's not just satisfying, it's energizing.
And are you learning German, good at German? You've picked it up. I was wondering whether you're, looking at all at trends in current German literature and fiction, and whether you tap into that at all.
I mean, I think becoming good at German is the work of a lifetime if you don't learn it before the age of 20. Like, I am learning it. I'm still doing classes. I have now got to the point where I can have a conversation with someone ungrammatically, but I need Grammarly if I'm going to write a formal email. I periodically read Deutsche Welle in German, but I'm working up to being able to read literature. I actually just bought a facing page collection of like German and English poetry.
Oh yes, great idea. Yeah.
So it's a project that's ongoing. Let's put it that way. I know that one of my editors at Scepter has just published Blood Book by Kim Lorizon, which is what every cool person in Berlin is reading.
Really? That's okay. That's a sort of hint. What's it called?
It's called Blood Book. It's like an experimental feminist, I think, family history.
That's the English title, is it?
Yes. So in German, it's like Blutbuch.
I mean, I was going to say it's probably quite similar in German. I mean, the great thing about reading poetry is that poems are generally quite short, so as opposed to reading a novel or something. So, well, I wish you a lot of luck in your continuing efforts to learn German. I mean, they just have those great big long compound nouns, don't they, where just words are stuck together to. But also very precise. Is it a very precise language? I think it is.
I mean, it's a great language for both making cars and writing poetry, because they have lots of different declensions for nouns. So you can both be really exact about who's doing what to whom in what direction, and you can also move words about more within a sentence and the meaning is still clear because of how they've been declined. But yeah, I mean, I'm going to need all the luck I have to get. One of my motivations actually for continuing to learn it is that a lot of people who come to Berlin and learn German, their mother tongue is not English, so they're trying to learn German in their second language. But there are also lots of people who only have their mother language and then German, and they get told that they have to speak English, even though that's an additional second language. And I also want to be able to talk to people who don't necessarily come from the Anglosphere and have a meaningful conversation. And the only way to do that is to both talk German to each other. Yeah.
Even if both of you are talking fairly imperfect German, you can still communicate with each other. It's kind of nice. It's like if I mean, I suppose in my case, if I would be talking to somebody Russian in French.
Exactly.
You can somehow, it's amazing how you can make yourself understood, I always think. Okay, right. I'm going to move on to my 3 questions to you, which I provided you with beforehand. So, in a city absolutely filled with artworks, what are you going for? Of course, it doesn't have to be an artwork that's in Berlin. I would love to hear what your favourite artwork is.
Yes. Weirdly, the artwork I'm going to pick is not in Berlin, it's in Paris. And I realised while I was researching these questions that the Musée d'Orsay has played like an outsized role in providing me with pictures to think about while writing, because the presiding painting for Parallel Hells was Dante and Virgil in Hell by Bouguereau, because it's very brutal and it's very homoerotic. It actually has a cameo in one of the stories. And then for the Decadence, my favourite artwork for that, and the one that I thought about constantly, it was actually hanging over my bed in London, so it's probably irreparably entwined with some of my ex's memories of me, is Thomas Couture's The Romans in Their Decadence. And so it was a Salon favourite in 1847, and then in 1848 they had the Revolution. So he got that moment just there, because it's an enormous painting. You could spend ages looking at it, and it's got this very raucous party of like semi-dressed Romans of cavorting and drinking wine, and in the middle of it is this woman who's leaning on what's basically a chaise longue, looking incredibly bored, but she's still in the events. And I think there's some of that spirit in Jan as well, where she's sort of judging, but she's also involved.
And is that where you got The Decadence as a title from as well?
Partially, yes. Yeah. So it came from that. And then also there's that sense of like being in and of its moment, like it's, you know, it's part of a decade. And then there's the more unsettling callback to what the Nazis described as decadent art, which was often by queer and Jewish people.
Oh, yes. I remember I was in Munich a few years back, and they have an amazing, sort of good for them, they have a very large section in their town museum about what happened in the Nazis. So this isn't art so much, this is the book burning, but they have a display of the sort of books that were all heaped onto bonfires, and it's really extraordinarily chilling. I will look out both of those paintings. In terms of Roman decadence, I always liked Alma Tadema.
Oh, yes.
And there's an amazing one of the people being smothered by rose petals at a banquet. Do you know the one I mean?
I have the postcard on my wall. I can't show you.
And a few years ago, I think it lives in South America or somewhere, and it came over and was on display at Leighton House. And that, again, is an enormous painting. You feel like you are also being smothered by rose petals just looking at it. It's staggering. So I'm going to check out both of those. Sorry?
I went to see it at Leighton House and I was so excited.
Oh, you saw it too? Yeah,
yes.
It was fabulous, wasn't it? Really good. Oh yes, Book of Shame. Book of Shame. Do you have one?
Yes. Well, in fact, I have two, a new one and an old one. Okay, I'm not going to gazump her by saying too much about it, but there is new writing from my friend and fellow author Victoria Gosling, which has been sitting in my inbox for a little while. And because I have been doing all of the stuff around the Decadence, I haven't been able to read it, but I am absolutely raring to go. So she wrote Before the Ruins, which is this amazing novel that's also about an abandoned mansion and a kind of very dysfunctional group of friends. It's not explicitly supernatural, but it was again really formative for my own thinking about that genre. And more latterly, she wrote Bliss and Blunder, which is a reworking of Arthurian legend in the present day. I think she's so fantastic and so astute. So that's going to be a real treat. And then the older book is the completed short stories of Isaac Bashevis Singer, which I've just started reading, and I'm so embarrassed that I haven't read it before because there's so much interesting fabulism in there. And he's also writing about shtetls, which are kind of, because some of my own forebears come from one, are kind of perennially interesting to me. But he's very funny. I didn't realize he was funny.
So is it a book of shame because, you know, the people sort of say, have you read Singer? Oh, you haven't read him? What are you talking about? Is he canonical in that sense?
I think to me he should be part of my personal canon because he is touching on some of the same themes, and also because we're both clearly very interested in short stories. And I feel like I should have read him at an earlier stage in my writing development, so I'm trying to make up for it now.
Is he writing in Yiddish and it's translated into English? Right. Yeah, I was trying to remember how it worked. I've read some of his short stories back in the way. I think I had a selected and was recommended by a friend, and they are filled with life, and his characters are amazing. I mean, even in a short story, he will sort of create a character that you can you feel like you know them. So, but yeah, very, very clever. Now, I mean, you're only 2 books in, so most bizarre or funniest feedback. I mean, you won't have had too much feedback on the Decadence yet, but did you have anything to relate?
Actually, I have just received a rather interesting Guardian review of my work. This came out a couple of days ago, and the author of the review, you know, not every book is for everyone. That's fair enough. She's entitled to her own taste. But she complains that it's not frightening enough, but then describes an encounter as unwitting threesome with an anti-Semitic ghost. And I found that odd because generally when encounters are unwitting, it's because they're not consensual, i.e. they're assault. And I thought that was a slightly odd omission from someone who made her name as a feminist critic. And I think it actually loops back to the way in the novel that Jan is not taken seriously, and that specifically as a Jewish woman, her experiences of being like people like having prejudice against her are just like undermined, and it ends up being a disaster in the book that she hasn't been listened to.
Well, one of the things about Jan that is, I mean, she very strongly feels that she's an outsider, and every so often she does try to explain why, and she's generally brushed off, you know, like, no, you're not, you're privileged, shut up, you know, be quiet, oh, you're so self-pitying. And that's one of the poignant aspects of the book, really, isn't it? That even her attempts to say how ill at ease she feels are not taken seriously.
Yes, and I'm really glad that comes through, because that brushing off, I think, is a really long-standing dynamic, sadly, where it's like, okay, you were useful to us up until this point, and now you've voiced the smallest bit of complaint, but you haven't done it in the way that we would like, because there actually is no way that we would like.
There is one other aspect, actually, thinking about it now. So it's set during lockdown, and that's very important for the plot, but there are references to the Middle East, and there's obviously always something going on in the Middle East, but I felt that there was a little bit, I don't even want to call it anachronism, but I felt you were writing really about a more current situation. And again, Jan is slightly being blamed for things that are not of her doing.
Funnily enough, actually, a lot of those conversations in the book were written before October 7th.
Right.
And I was like, you know, while editing it, I was like, what am I doing with this exactly? You know, do I trust myself to have this character who at times is not fully sympathetic, is not a perfect victim? And, you know, do I want to take this out? I was like, no, because then the book completely loses its horror, because it is very much about kind of discrimination and, you know, and non-consensual activity at its heart. And what I decided was like, no, I'm going to leave this in. I'm going to try to let it speak for itself. And so you have these characters whose personal and political relationships are in conversation with each other always uneasily throughout.
Yeah, it's another really interesting strand, and it's very interesting to, you know, when you're reviewing, you just have to think, oh, you know, I'm going to say that this is out of time, or, you know, this was clearly written before, and you don't really know. I suppose what I would say is that it's only gained in resonance since you were writing the book. You know, the whole theme of, I mean, Jan, like to this day, the theme of being blamed or stigmatized for something that you can't help and have nothing to do with. It's just got more and more resonant, really, hasn't it? I mean, does the book sort of change slightly in your mind, where you sort of think, I knew something that I didn't know I knew in the writing, maybe?
I mean, I wish it were less relevant. I would like, I wish her complaints were unfounded. That would be great. But I think probably in the characterization of her complaints and the way that some of the characters respond very unhelpfully to them, I was picking up on something that was unfortunately already present in the discourse before things already got worse. You know, maybe like in this sort of post, maybe even peace plan watershed, we will be able to kind of, here's hoping, like we will be able to look more critically at how different kind of oppressions like bounce off of each other and continue trying to take each other seriously. But like, I do not know. The world has become so hard to predict from one day to another.
Yes, I mean, fiction struggles to keep up with what's going on in the world. But I think often because you're tapping into your subconscious, and a lot of writers sort of say this to me, that they do things like put a detail in and they don't know why it's a significant detail until much later. And then, aha, that's why there was a rocking horse in the back bedroom or whatever, And I think your subconscious does quite a bit of work, doesn't it?
In some ways, it's actually not dissimilar to kind of writing horror, because there are lots of like little significant objects throughout the Decadence that like the reader might not necessarily notice the first time round. I mean, almost all the objects are significant, the dates are significant, little offhand remarks are significant. And going back through, sometimes I was during the editing, I was like, oh, I left this there for myself, and sometimes it was purposeful the first time around. But yeah, it is an odd experience of writing where, because you're working both with your conscious and your subconscious mind, stuff will kind of float up from the subconscious, and you didn't necessarily predict the import that it would have.
Exactly. Well, I have to thank you for my strange heroin-taking dream that I had last night, which I'm convinced came from reading The Decadence late into the night. So here it is again. Beautiful cover, by the way. The cover is sensational. Presumably, did you give it the thumbs up?
Yeah, I think I'm really happy with what the Scepter team did, because we were just talking about all the different kind of films that have a similar atmosphere to it, like The Cook, The Thief, His Wife and Her Lover, The Favourite, and also The Handmaiden. And like once we started talking about that, then the storyboarding process got really picked up steam. And there's a semi-hidden detail that I want to point out, which is that there is a dead wasp for each one of the living characters.
Oh my goodness! I did see the dead wasps. I didn't count them though. Oh. And then a flower that looks sort of strangely satanic, like a satanic mask or face. And it also looks like one of the paintings that might well hang in your haunted mansion. I mean, that's the immediate reference. So yeah, beautifully published by Scepter. So well done, everyone there. I'm going to let you go. Are you in Berlin or are you in London?
I am in Berlin right now. It is grey outside, but not raining.
Oh, great. Yes, it's dark, and we're coming up to Halloween, so it's the perfect time to read dark, dissonant, spooky literature. And I think the Decadence really fits the bill. So well done. It's a fabulous book. And I shall bid you adieu. Enjoy. Auf Wiedersehen, even. That's sort of it. That's all I know, Leon. That's all I know. Okay, so farewell. Oh, I'll remove you. Right. Goodbye. We will leave Leon to the delights of Berlin. We've been talking about The Decadence, fabulous novel, debut novel. There's been a lot to unpack. I hope you've enjoyed my chat with Leon Craig. Join me again next time. I'll find somebody equally fascinating to chat to. Till then, remember to like and subscribe. Goodbye.